we are in war. They attacked us. But what we need from our national leadership now is to determine who is the them and who is the us. And there are two broad choices. It is us Westerners against them, all of Islam, or is it us moderates of all religions against them, radicals of all religions. And we have organisations in this country like Reclaim Australia who really are falling into the trap of Islamic State, who are trying to create the us Westerners against them, all of Islam. If we fall into that trap, we're saying we want to fight with 1.6 billion people. Whereas if we define the us as all moderates of all religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, against radicals of all religions, it's a much smaller number to fight and a much more effective number to fight. So what we've got to do at the beginning, Terry, to come to your question, we need to make sure as a country the us is moderates of all religions against them, the radicals of all religions.
The very important thing is that we don't allow people to change our way of life. That the terrorists and the extremists want us to change the way we live. We are a very sophisticated, successful, liberal democracy, and we have to make sure that when this process is all finished, when this is over, and it will be over at some point, we are still a sophisticated, liberal, open democracy. That's the most important priority. How do we achieve that end? Well, we have to achieve it in a number of ways. We achieve it by continuing with our current way of life. And we achieve it by militarily defeating ISIS in Syria and Iraq. That is a necessary foundation for being able to go on with our way of life. But we achieve it too by not allowing ISIS to do what they want to do, which Andrew alluded to, which is turning Australian against Australian or European against European. So we mustn't allow extremist militant Islamists to represent the Islamic faith. Moderate Muslims need to be embraced in Australia or elsewhere. Moderate Muslim governments need to be embraced wherever they might be, because they have as much at stake as we do in defeating the extremists.
The question where to from here, I believe that now absolutely has to be a time for cool and calm heads. And that means that our leaders need to all step up and be putting forward messages of unity and the importance of it. And I don't just talk about political leaders, I think all leaders across our community. I mean, I for one cannot for a moment comprehend why Pauline Hanson was on our television over the weekend speaking about these events and about Muslim Australians. We need to... and I guess in the spirit I've just spoken about, I agree with everything that Christopher just said on this issue. This is a time when, of course, we need to make sure that we have safeguards and security provisions in place, but we also have to make sure that we make very clear to everyone that moderate Muslims are our closest ally, and they must be our closest ally in this fight.
Nick Xenophon.
Well, firstly, we need to embrace the moderates. This can't be about against Islam, it's about moderates against extremists. But let's put this in perspective. ISIS did not exist before March 2003, before the American invasion of Iraq. As bad as Saddam Hussein was, and he was a brutal dictator, the US, in a botched strategy, a muddle-headed strategy, made a mess of things, and it spawned sectarian violence. We have to avoid the mistakes of the past. We must deal with the existential threat that ISIS is to the West. But we must acknowledge that we cannot bomb our way out of this. We must acknowledge that if we have indiscriminate... because what happened in Iraq was a bloody mess. We have to learn from that, and unless we learn from it, we're destined to repeat the same mistakes.
I think, to your point, we do need to better understand who it is that we're fighting. I think we've made some mistakes in how the strategy has been played out. So in part, I think you're right that it needs to be smarter strategies. In part, we need leaders to be more careful with the way that we use language. And in part, we need to understand that this is a really complex and challenging issue. You know, as Christopher alluded to, it's not just going to be able to be a military strategy that will solve this problem. We do need to approach that part of it. We know part of ISIS's legitimacy is its hold on territory, and that needs to be dealt with. Part of it is a political solution. So how do we ensure stability back into that region, enable governance, restore a nation that is war-torn? And in part, as well, to Kate's point, I think it is about community leadership. You know, terrorism cannot proliferate where social cohesion is strong. And that's part of the solution that each and every single one of us can play a role in how do we ensure that tolerance, unity, that multiculturalism is something that we are living and we're demonstrating day in, day out.
A very important issue for a country like France, and it's probably the same in Britain. Roughly 9 to 10% of the population now is Muslim. It's a very important community, but of course 96, 97, 98% of them are good people, and probably we've not done enough in the past 20 years to bring them fully into the nation. When I look at Australia, I do see that you've been, behaving and working far better than us in the previous 20 years to bring new immigrants into your communities, and in that sense, Australia is a true model. So we have to work on that. And for instance, if I can make a confidence to you, I have myself adopted a Muslim boy. He was 19 years old at the time, and I try to do my best to give him the chance to become a true French citizen. And now what he wants to become? An Australian.